The first thing you notice, or maybe the thing you notice a little while in, once your eyes stop just going along with everything, is the background. You're watching this cartoon, right? A cartoon about a blue cat and his goldfish brother living in suburban California. Standard stuff, apparently. And then something in the corner of the frame catches your attention. It's too sharp, too textured, too real somehow for what's supposed to be a children's animated series. And then it clicks. That's a photograph, an actual photograph of an actual street or park or shopping centre somewhere. And these cartoon characters are just walking through it as if that's a completely normal thing to be doing. That small moment of slight cognitive dissonance, that pause where your brain goes, wait, hang on, is, I think, the key to understanding why The Amazing World of Gumball worked as well as it did for as long as it did. The show was never designed to look cohesive. It was built from mismatched parts on purpose. Two-dimensional characters on three-dimensional objects, walking past live-action photographic backgrounds, occasionally slipping into sequences rendered in entirely different animation styles by entirely different studios. There's stop motion in there, puppetry, flat web animation, watercolour, 8-bit game graphics. At various points across its 6-season run, the show just changed what it looked like mid-episode and then changed back, sometimes without acknowledging it had done anything unusual at all. And the remarkable thing is that none of it feels chaotic. The whole thing has a consistent tone, warm, dry, genuinely funny, occasionally surprisingly sad, that holds together regardless of what's happening visually, which is either a testament to very strong character writing, or to the fact that children's brains are more flexible than adults give them credit for, or probably both at once. I don't know. Most likely both. The Amazing World of Gumball ran for 6 seasons on Cartoon Network, from May 2011 to June 2019. 240 11-minute episodes in total, plus a couple of mini-series and a film that was announced and is apparently still somehow in development. It won 38 awards across that span: BAFTA Children's, International Emmy, Annie Awards, British Animation Awards, among others, and it built a fan base that treated it with the kind of devoted, detail-obsessed affection that you usually see reserved for things aimed at people considerably older than 12. Tonight we're going through some of the episodes that defined the show, the ones that changed what the series was doing, the ones fans come back to, the ones with production stories interesting enough to sit with for a while. We'll move through them roughly in order, but without much urgency about it. There'll be tangents. There usually are when I talk about this show, because the details tend to be good enough that they're worth getting distracted by. If you've never watched Gumball, I'll try to sketch things clearly enough that this makes sense as you drift in and out of it. If you grew up with it, hopefully there's enough here that you haven't heard before to make it worth settling in for. And if you're already comfortable and starting to fade, that is entirely fine. That is, in fact, the whole point. So, The Amazing World of Gumball. Let's start with the town itself, and the slightly unlikely story of how any of this got made in the first place. Elmore is a fictional city somewhere in California. It's the kind of place where a Tyrannosaurus Rex attends middle school alongside a ghost, a sentient cloud, a living piece of toast, and a cactus, and nobody finds this remarkable. The students in Miss Simeon's class include a walking balloon animal, a banana, a potato with arms, and an 8-bit video game character who exists in 3 dimensions. The background characters who fill the hallways and streets are similarly eclectic. Something like 543 new character designs were added in Season 2 alone, according to the animation team. That's not a typo, 543. The lead characters are the Watterson family. Gumball, 12 years old, a blue cartoon cat with the kind of relentless confidence that comes from being absolutely wrong about everything on a fairly regular basis. Darwin, his younger adoptive brother, a goldfish who grew legs and became his best friend. The show presents this completely sincerely, and so do I. Anais, their 4-year-old sister, the most intelligent member of the family by a significant margin and quietly aware of it. Nicole, their mother, who works at a factory called the Rainbow Factory and is the reason the family functions at all. And Richard, their father, a large pink rabbit who is the most thoroughly lovable disaster of a man I have ever seen in a cartoon, and I mean that kindly. The show was created by Ben Bocquelet, a French-English animator born in 1980 who spent years working in London doing commercial animation, the kind of work where you design characters for advertisements that then either get used or don't, and either way, nobody outside the industry ever thinks about them. During that time, he built up a fairly large collection of rejected designs, characters he'd developed for pitches that didn't land, for campaigns that changed direction, for projects that dissolved before they went anywhere. When Cartoon Network opened a development studio in London in 2007, Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, and invited Bocquelet in to help other people pitch ideas, he started thinking about what to do with his folder of discarded characters. His original pitch was a show about rejected cartoon characters attending a remedial school, sort of like if all the characters who didn't make it into the shows they were designed for had to go somewhere. And that somewhere was a strange school, where they could try to figure out what to do with themselves. There's something genuinely quite poignant about that idea. The producers felt it was, in their words, too sad, which is fair. So Bocquelet revised it, made it a family sitcom, set in a suburban neighbourhood, built around a specific family he based loosely on his own. The mother is named Nicole after his mother. The father is named Richard after his father. The younger sister is named Anais after his sister. And the blue cat at the centre of everything is, in some sense, Bocquelet himself. Though I imagine he'd tell you Gumball is a funnier version, or at least a version who gets into more interesting trouble. Daniel Leonard at Turner Broadcasting greenlit the production in 2009, and the show premiered in the UK on May 2, 2011, with the US sneak peek airing the same day and the full American premiere on May 9. It won 2 BAFTA Children's Awards in its first year, Best Animation and Best Writing, which is the kind of early recognition that suggests, even then, that people were starting to notice the show was doing something genuinely different. Now, let's get a bit better acquainted with the family and the world before we dive into specific episodes. Because a lot of what makes individual moments in Gumball land the way they do depends on knowing who these people are and what they're like. And there's quite a lot to cover, honestly. Pull the blanket up and let's get into it. Now, we touched on the origin story briefly in the opening, so I won't repeat all of it, but it's worth going a bit deeper on the visual side of things, because the way Gumball actually looks is unusual enough that it deserves its own conversation. The core technique, and I'm using that word loosely, because Gumball was fairly resistant to having a single core technique, was to take photographic backgrounds and populate them with animated characters. Real locations, shot by the production team, then used as the backdrop for everything that happened in Elmore. The street outside the Watterson house is a photograph. The hallways of Elmore Junior High are photographs. The mall, the park, the petrol station, the inside of the family car, all real spaces, photographed and then handed over to the animation team to fill with cartoon characters. The effect, once you notice it, is slightly uncanny in a way that works perfectly for the show. Elmore feels like a real place that's been invaded by animated characters, which is more or less what it is, and because the background textures are photographic rather than painted, they have a depth and a specificity that traditional animation backgrounds often don't. There are real shadows on those streets, real grain in the pavement, real leaves on the trees outside the school. Mike Graves was the series director across the first 4 seasons, which is a fairly extraordinary commitment when you consider that each season was around 40 episodes long. He'd previously worked with Boccolade at Studio AKA in London, which is how a lot of the early creative team came together. People who'd known each other from commercial work, now building something more ambitious. The animation itself used a mixture of tools depending on what was being made. Gumball's 2D characters were handled in Flash initially, later switching to other software. CGI elements, objects, backgrounds, certain characters were produced separately and composited in. Guest animators would occasionally be brought in to handle specific sequences in their own style, which is how you end up with moments in the show where the visual language changes entirely for 30 seconds and then returns to normal. In Season 2, as I mentioned, the team designed 543 new characters and costumes. That is an almost incomprehensible number for an 11-minute children's cartoon. It reflects something about how seriously the show took the world of Elmore. The idea that even the characters in the background who appeared for 3 seconds deserved to be interesting. The sound design was handled by Fitzrovia Post, and they won a British Animation Award for Best Use of Sound in 2020. The sound of Gumball is quite specific. The Foley work is detailed in a way that you don't always consciously register, but that contributes enormously to the show feeling lived in. The way footsteps sound on those photographic pavements, the way doors creak, the ambient noise of Elmore's streets, which has a slightly off quality, a bit too quiet, or a bit too present, that matches the show's overall aesthetic perfectly. The BAFTA recognition came early and kept coming. Best Animation and Best Writing in 2011, awarded in November 2012, covering the first season. Over the course of the original run, the show accumulated 38 award wins in total, from organisations as varied as the British Academy, the International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and the Annie Awards Committee in Los Angeles. For a show that looks like it was assembled from spare parts, it was taken very seriously by the people whose job it is to evaluate animation. Bockley himself has described the development studio experience as the fruit of a really lucky work experience. He was working at a studio helping other people pitch ideas to Cartoon Network when the network told everyone on staff to pitch their own ideas instead, and he happened to have this folder of discarded characters sitting on his desk. There's something I find quite lovely about that. One of the most formally inventive children's shows of the 2010s started because a deadline moved and somebody had to find something to do with a pile of cartoons nobody else wanted. Now, since we're in Elmore and we know how it got built, let's spend some time with the people who live there. Because before the episodes make sense, the family has to make sense. Let's start with Gumball because the show is named after him, and he would be insufferable about it if we didn't. Gumball Watterson is 12 years old, anthropomorphic, and blue. He's the kind of character who is always absolutely certain he's right about everything, and is wrong with an almost artful consistency. Not mean-spirited wrong, more the specific variety of wrong that comes from enthusiasm, slightly outpacing competence. He means well. He genuinely, sincerely means well most of the time, which is part of why you forgive him quite a lot of things over the course of 6 seasons. The voice changed 3 times during the original run. Logan Grove handled Seasons 1 through early Season 3. Jacob Hopkins came in partway through Season 3 and carried on through most of Season 5. And Nicholas Cantu took over for the rest of the run. Most fans have a strong opinion about which voice they grew up with. Darwin is the more interesting case, honestly. He is a goldfish, he was a pet fish, he grew legs and became Gumball's adoptive brother and then his best friend. And the show treats this as both completely natural and occasionally quietly profound. He's kinder than Gumball and more observant, which means he's frequently the one who notices what's actually happening in a situation, while Gumball is busy being confidently wrong about it. Darwin went through 4 voice actors across the original run: Kwesi Boki, then Terrell Ransom Jr., then Doniel T. Hansley Jr., then Christian J. Simon in Season 6. Each transition was handled by working the voice change into the plot, which is a very Gumball way of solving a very practical problem. Anais is 4 years old and is genuinely the sharpest person in the Watterson household. She's voiced throughout the original run by Kyla Ray Kowalewski, and she has a particular quality that I think a lot of younger siblings will recognise. She's entirely aware of how much smarter she is than the people around her, but she loves them anyway, which is both more mature and more interesting than simply being smug about it. She has a stuffed toy called Daisy the Donkey that drives episodes in Season 1, and she spends a lot of time watching her brothers do things she already knows won't work, and either helping or occasionally just watching. Nicole is the reason the family functions. She's voiced by Teresa Gallagher, who is genuinely brilliant in the role, and she's the sort of character who is terrifying when angry, and she does get angry, usually because Richard has done something, but whose love for her family is the emotional foundation the show keeps returning to. She works at a place called the Rainbow Factory, which is never fully explained, and she has a physical competence that the show occasionally pushes into, frankly, superhuman territory. She can bend a metal pole with her hands. She has won fights with things considerably larger than herself. She is also the one who keeps the electricity on. Richard is Dan Russell, and Richard is, I want to say this kindly, an absolute disaster. He's large and pink and rabbit-shaped and cheerful and profoundly, magnificently lazy. He hasn't had a job for the entirety of the children's lives. He cooks by microwaving things. He loses the car frequently, and occasionally the house. And yet the show loves him completely. He's not portrayed as incompetent in a way that's punishing or mean. He's portrayed as someone who experiences the world with uncomplicated enthusiasm, and occasionally, by accident, stumbles into being genuinely sweet. His relationship with his family, particularly his relationship with Nicole, is a surprisingly functional and loving one, underneath all the chaos. The extended cast of Elmore is too large to do justice to properly, but a few people are worth meeting now, since they'll come up repeatedly. Larry is Elmore's most hard-working citizen by a significant margin. He works for the Paldea region's POHK Mon League. He also works at the gas station, and the pizza place, and the video rental shop, and apparently also somewhere in the POHK Mon League. He's a background character for most of the show, who develops over the seasons into a surprisingly poignant figure, a man who has to work every job in town because nobody else will, and somehow maintains his dignity through all of it. He has a specific kind of long-suffering patience that the show treats with affection. Miss Simeon is the main character's teacher, and she's been teaching 8th graders for approximately 300,000 years. This is stated in the show as a fact and not commented upon further. She has a long-running romantic attachment to Principal Brown, who is described as a slug in a fur coat and who is trying his best. Between the two of them, they represent a very specific kind of adult incompetence that children's television does well, not malicious, just consistently in slightly over their heads. And then there's Elmore Junior High itself, which looks like a real school because it's photographed like one and is populated by the most genuinely eclectic student body in fictional education. A T-Rex who manages her anger issues with moderate success. A ghost who is going through a quite serious emo phase. A banana who is also the class clown and takes that role very seriously. A living piece of toast. An 8-bit video game character who can take items out of his own inventory and weaponize them. A pencil who has strong feelings about everything. This is the world. Now let's see what happened in it. I want to spend a bit of time on the supporting cast, because Gumball had a larger and more thoughtfully constructed set of peripheral characters than it usually gets credit for. They're not always in focus, but they accumulate. Larry is the most complete example. We've already established that he works every job in Elmore simultaneously, which the show presents as simply true, rather than as a joke premise requiring explanation. What's worth adding is what the show does with that over time. Larry is the person whose life the Wattersons disrupt most consistently across the series. They cause scenes in his grocery store, they screw up his video rental operation, they damage his gas station, they get him involved in situations that are not his fault and that he has to resolve. By the job, when Larry has to fire Richard to save the universe, there's a small ceremony to it. He gains a deep, resonant voice for approximately 10 seconds to do the firing, and then he's just Larry again. The laziest, later in the series, is where Richard and Larry compete to see who can do the least possible work. Larry isn't in this episode, but the episode establishes something about Elmore's economy that Larry embodies. This is a town where one person's laziness has direct consequences for everyone else's workload. Richard's laziness is always Larry's problem, somewhere down the line. Larry gets what might be his best episode in the later seasons when his relationship, he has a partner, Karen, who appears eventually, is given some screen time. He's a person who has a life outside of being the town's service industry. He has feelings about things. The show reveals this slowly and without ceremony. Carrie Kruger is the ghost who sits in the back of the classroom with dark circles under her eyes and the general aesthetic of someone who has been processing a lot of emotions since approximately the Victorian era. She's voiced throughout the original run with a kind of exhausted deadpan that suits her perfectly. The ghost in season 1 is where she possesses Gumball's body to experience eating, and it's presented as a fairly straightforward comic premise. But the underpinning is that Carrie is separated from physical experience by her nature, and her way of dealing with that is to borrow someone else's, which is a strange and somewhat sad thing, even in a comedy episode. She develops over the course of the series. There are episodes that deal with her feelings more directly, and by later seasons she's a more rounded presence, still dry, still the goth among them, but more clearly someone who has genuine relationships with the people around her. Halloween is a season 2 episode that gives her more space and uses her relationship with the living more thoughtfully than the ghost does. Tina Rex is the T-Rex. She's managing her anger, as mentioned. She has a dad who is also a T-Rex and who appears occasionally and who seems to have had some success with the anger management that Tina is still working on. She's not in many episodes, but the ones she's in tend to use her, well, there's a specific comedy that comes from a Tyrannosaurus Rex participating in normal school social dynamics, and the show deploys it with reasonable restraint rather than relying on it as a crutch. Banana Joe is the class clown, and the show is occasionally quite honest about what the class clown role actually costs someone. He's frequently the butt of jokes rather than the one making them, despite his own self-image as the funniest person in the room. The banana in season 2 gives him more of a character than he usually has. He does something thoughtless, he doesn't quite grasp why it mattered, and the episode treats him generously, while also being clear that his obliviousness has real effects on the people around him. He's not stupid exactly, he's just operating on a slightly different set of priorities. The Fitzgeralds, Penny's family, become more important in season 6, particularly the transformation, where the whole family's argument about shells and identity gets Gumball caught in the middle. Patrick, Penny's father, is one of those characters who started as a simple obstacle, the protective dad who disapproves of Gumball, and gradually became more human. By the time the transformation gives him a whole episode to exist in, he's recognisably a person rather than just a function. And there's Mr. Small, the guidance counsellor, who is consistently useless in exactly the right ways. He practices various alternative therapies and spiritual techniques that don't work. He is very sincere. He is not particularly helpful. He drives the van that Rob grabs onto in the void, and he never knows what he transported. The show premiered May 9, 2011 in the US with a pair of episodes, The Responsible and the DVD. The UK had already seen the DVD as a sneak peek the week before. That first American broadcast drew 2.12 million viewers, which for a new show on a cable channel is a reasonable start. By the time season 1 was wrapping up, it had found enough of an audience that a second season had actually been commissioned before the first one had even aired. The renewal came in March 2011, 2 months before the US premiere. Season 1 has 36 episodes, which is 4 fewer than subsequent seasons. 4 episodes were scrapped during production for various reasons that haven't all been made public, and the show adjusted its episode count to compensate in later seasons. The first 4 seasons were all directed by Mick Graves, which gives them a certain consistency in terms of rhythm and pacing, even as the writing got more ambitious. The Responsible is a good entry point into what early Gumball is like. Gumball and Darwin are left in charge of babysitting Anais while their parents attend a school meeting, and being responsible turns out to mean something somewhat different to the boys than it does to Nicole. The episode is warm and silly and relatively grounded, a genuine screwball comedy about 3 children trying to keep the house from burning down, more or less. Anais spends most of it quietly managing the situation while her brothers escalate it. The DVD is the one where Gumball rents a DVD and then destroys it and has to figure out how to avoid paying the replacement cost, which leads to an escalating series of complications as he and Darwin scheme to cover the fee before Nicole finds out. It's a tight, funny episode that establishes pretty early on that Gumball's plans will consistently make things worse. The Ghost is one I have a particular soft spot for from season 1. A classmate called Carrie, the Ghost, possesses Gumball's body so that she can experience eating food, since ghosts can't taste things, which seems fine until it becomes clear that she has absolutely no intention of leaving. The episode is comedically solid, but there's something underneath it, Carrie using someone else's body as a workaround for the limitations of her own existence, that the show will come back to in more emotional terms later in the run. For now, it plays it mostly for laughs, and the laughs work. The mystery was the UK sneak peek episode, and it's a good one. A whodunit where Principal Brown has been found in the school corridor, wrapped in toilet paper, shaved and covered in green paint. And Gumball has to solve the case before the whole class faces detention. The show does Agatha Christie, essentially, and does it with genuine structural competence. The solution involves Miss Simeon and is both surprising and, in retrospect, completely logical. There's a lovely moment in The Painting, which is actually season 1. It aired in the early part of season 1, but let's include it here because it fits, where Anais draws a picture of the Wattersons for school, and Principal Brown sees it and interprets the whole thing as a sign that the family is dysfunctional and needs intervention. So he assigns Nicole to stay home, Richard to get a job the first time this happens. It doesn't go well, and the boys to see Mr. Small, the guidance counsellor. Anais breaks the 4th wall in this episode, very casually, noting that the family has been wearing the same clothes for a whole year. The show doesn't make a big deal out of it. It just lets it sit there. That's quite characteristic of early Gumball, actually. There are these small self-aware moments scattered through the first season that don't yet announce themselves as anything in particular, but that in retrospect you can see as the beginning of the show's relationship with its own fictional nature, a thread that would eventually become one of its most interesting qualities. The finale aired at the end of season 2, not season 1, but since we're talking about the early era, it belongs in this conversation. It's the episode where a huge mob of characters, the Wattersons, have wronged, people affected by their schemes and accidents and general chaos over the series, comes to confront them simultaneously. The whole of Elmore, basically, marching on the house. The resolution it describes, where Nicole punches the universe so hard that reality resets, actually happens in the finale of the Amazing World of Gumball. Not in any episode of POH came on. It's a funny episode, but it also functions as a kind of accounting. Here's everything that happened. Here's what it cost. Here's how it gets resolved. The show would return to this structure more explicitly later on. Season 1 is charming and funny, and occasionally very inventive. It's also clearly a show figuring out what it is. The characters are consistent, but not yet fully dimensional. The format is settled. The episodes are 11-minute stories, typically paired in a 30-minute broadcast slot, but the ambition is mostly contained within that format, rather than pushing at the edges of it. That starts to change in Season 2, and the episode that most people point to as the moment it changed is one where Richard gets a job delivering pizza. The job is the 8th episode of Season 2. It aired in September 2012. It is the 44th episode of the show overall. According to TV tropes, which in this case is actually quite useful, it is widely considered to be the first episode of the Amazing World of Gumball that people point to when they call the show a great show, rather than a good one. I think that's roughly right. The premise is simple and beautiful. Richard accidentally gets a job. He calls the number for furthest pizza delivery, not realising it's a job application rather than an ordering line. They ask for his social security number, which he finds mildly suspicious, but not suspicious enough to stop. And he turns up with a scooter and a uniform and tells Gumball and Darwin with enormous pride that he is now an Italian food distribution engineer. Nicole faints. The episode opens with her at the breakfast table, before the kids start talking about jobs, which is a perfect first image. Nicole doesn't faint because she doesn't believe Richard can do the job. She faints because she instinctively senses that something about this is cosmically wrong. She can't articulate it exactly. She just knows. And she's right, because the show's central joke is this. The concept of Richard being gainfully employed is so fundamentally at odds with the laws of the universe, as Elmore has established them, that reality itself starts to malfunction. Not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally, weirdly, with building escalation. Water flows upward from the kitchen tap. In The Job, the banana family across the street gets stuck in an infinite loop, chanting pizza, pizza, pizza on repeat. People start randomly aging. Objects float. The ordinary sitcom rule, the lazy husband doesn't work, that's the bit, is not just a character trait in Elmore. It's a structural law of the universe, and Richard violating it is genuinely threatening to cause the end of the world. Richard himself is completely oblivious to all of this. He's riding his scooter around Elmore, delivering pizzas and loving every moment. The dramatic music that plays during the chase sequence is, I'll note, just the names of Italian foods, pasta, gnocchi, rigatoni, chanted operatically. There's a running gag where Nicole tries to say she's proud of Richard, and physically can't get the word out. She keeps stumbling on it, starting it, failing, circling back. I think I'm proud of you, Richard. She can't make herself say it. It's a small joke and a slightly larger observation about how unfamiliar those words are in that particular arrangement for that particular person aimed at that particular man. The resolution requires Larry to fire Richard, which he does with tremendous reluctance. Not because he wants to end the world, but because he'd discovered Richard had been eating bits of the pizzas during his deliveries. The moment he's fired, reality snaps back. Everything undone. Larry gains a deep dramatic voice for approximately 3 seconds to announce the termination and then returns to normal. The universe apparently was waiting for this specific administrative action. The episode was not actually nominated for those 2 Annie Awards in 2013, Best Animated Television, Production for Children, and Outstanding Achievement in Directing in an Animated Television Production. Only one went to an episode of Dragons, Riders of Berk, which is fine. The episode didn't need the award. What The Job actually accomplished is harder to quantify, but more important. It's the episode that established that Gumball was aware of its own genre, The show wasn't just a sitcom set in a cartoon town. It was a show that knew it was a sitcom and that understood the rules of the sitcom form well enough to treat those rules as literal laws of physics. The lazy husband not having a job isn't just a character note, it's load-bearing. The universe of the show requires it, and that's a very specific and very interesting idea that the show would spend the next 4 seasons developing in increasingly elaborate ways. There's also something quite warm at the centre of it. Richard, bless him, actually wants to do the job well. He's enthusiastic and careful, and genuinely pleased to be contributing. He has no idea the world is ending around him. And when he's fired, the family comforts him, and he immediately says he'll keep looking, which means the fabric of reality remains hanging in the balance forever. The episode ends on that note. The threat finally resolved. The universe back to normal because Richard Watterson is once again unemployed. The writers came up with the episode according to a Reddit AMA with James Lamont, because they thought it would be funny to watch Richard ride a motorcycle. From that small, silly starting point, they built one of the defining episodes of the series. That seems right for this show. Season 2 is where the show found its footing in a way that's hard to miss in retrospect. The individual episodes are stronger, the writing is sharper, and there are a few episodes that establish patterns the show would return to throughout its entire run. The Words is one of those episodes. Darwin decides to start saying everything he's actually thinking, all the things people normally edit out before they speak, all the observations you make about people but file away because saying them out loud would be unkind or inappropriate or just unnecessarily complicated. The episode is a fairly honest look at what human conversation would be like if we skipped the filtering layer entirely, and it's both funnier and more uncomfortable than you'd expect. Darwin ends up hurting people he doesn't mean to hurt, and learning that kindness and honesty aren't always the same thing, which is a reasonable lesson for a fish to pick up. The Remote is the episode that, according to more than one fan, converted them from someone who thought Gumball was a decent show into someone who thought it was a great show. The entire Watterson family fighting over the TV remote with escalating absurdity and genuine emotional stakes. Their relationships taking some comedic bruises before bouncing back to normal. The kids revealing things about themselves through their conflict. The whole episode keeping its stakes grounded even as the comedy pushes them further and further. It's a technically very good piece of sitcom writing in a format that doesn't usually get credit for technical sitcom writing. The banana is smaller in scale and sort of lovely. Banana Joe, the class clown, chews Darwin's pen, and Darwin's friendship with Gumball is briefly threatened. It's about how small acts of thoughtlessness can destabilize trust, and how friendships between younger kids are fragile in ways that don't always map onto the apparent seriousness of the incident. Banana Joe isn't a villain, he's just someone who didn't think. The show is pretty generous about making that distinction. The finale I've mentioned, but let me stay with it for a moment. There's a specific pleasure in that episode that comes from how much it trusts the audience to remember the show. Every character who appears to confront the Wattersons is someone the audience has met. Every grievance is a callback to a real episode. The show spent 2 seasons creating a world, and the finale is essentially a ledger. Here's what it cost. The resolution, Nicole punching reality until it resets, is exactly the right ending. It earns its absurdity because it commits to it completely. There's also The Words again. Wait, I mentioned that one. Let me talk about something else. The banana has a moment where Banana Joe laughs, and a small sliver of banana just falls off him, which is one of the funnier visual gags in the season, and which I think about more often than is reasonable. The broader shape of Season 2 is a show becoming more confident in what it's doing. The individual episodes start taking bigger swings, the character work gets more specific, and the meta-awareness, the sense that the show knows it's a show and is interested in what that means, starts to become a genuine through line. rather than an occasional wink. By the time season 3 arrived, Gumball was doing something that very few children's shows had attempted: building a mythology. A small, strange, sometimes genuinely affecting mythology about fictional characters becoming aware of their own fictional nature runs through the Amazing World of Gumball as a whole. But before we get to the parts of that mythology that involve a villain, we need to talk about the episode that changed what Penny Fitzgerald looked like forever. Since we're on the topic of character development, and since season 3 is where the show gets most deliberately ambitious about it, let's spend some time with the episode that fans most often point to as the emotional heart of the series. Or at least, the one that made the most people feel something unexpected watching a cartoon about a cat and a goldfish. Penny Fitzgerald spent the first 2.5 seasons of Gumball looking like an anthropomorphic peanut with antlers. A light brown shell, slightly curved, with a set of tan antlers growing out of the top, and small holes where her arms and legs came through. She had a name, a family, a long-running mutual crush with Gumball that both of them were too awkward and too 12 to actually do anything about. And a shell. That was Penny. The Shell is the 20th episode of season 3, the 96th episode overall. It was the first season 3 episode to be publicly revealed, and it had been in production since at least January 2013, well before the season began airing. Ben Bockley described it in an interview as Miyazaki-esque. That's a high bar to set for your own work, but the episode earns it, or at least earns the reference. The setup is that Gumball and Penny are performing the final scene of Beauty and the Beast for the school play. Gumball is the Beast, Penny is Belle. There's a kiss at the end of the play. Gumball tries to do it, and instead headbutts Penny, because of course he does, and the headbutt cracks her shell over one eye. In the dressing room afterward, something is visible, sparkling inside the crack. Penny covers it quickly. She's clearly upset about the crack in her shell. What follows is Gumball gently, persistently, incorrectly at first, trying to convince Penny that what's underneath the shell is fine, that she can show people who she really is. The show is not subtle about the allegory. Penny has been hiding inside something that doesn't look like her, and the people who love her are telling her she doesn't have to. There's even a moment where Gumball says the crack gives her character, like a beautiful warlord or an adorable Frankenstein, which is the least poetic pep talk imaginable, and somehow also exactly right. When Penny's shell fully breaks open, she's a shape-shifting fairy creature, luminous, non-corporeal, with her antlers still present in almost every form she takes. That's the show's morphic resonance, as the TV tropes page calls it. Her antlers are almost always there. But her emotional state determines her shape. When she's happy, she's beautiful, faintly glowing, enormous-eyed. When she's frightened or ashamed, she comes out of her shell. And because she runs away convinced that everyone will see her as a monster, she keeps transforming into exactly that. The Ghibli references that Bockley mentioned are specific. Penny's dragon form is very close to Haku's dragon form from Spirited Away. Her wolf form echoes Princess Mononoke. Her pig form is also from Mononoke. These aren't accidental resemblances. The episode is consciously borrowing the visual vocabulary of Studio Ghibli's most emotionally ambitious work and applying it to a cartoon peanut. And this should be ridiculous, but it works completely. There's a scene where Gumball chases Penny through Elmore. She's transforming through increasingly frightening shapes, drawing stares, convinced this proves she's exactly what she feared people would think. And he keeps following and keeps trying to reach her. Penny, in her wolf form, finally turns and asks him, in a voice that's barely recognisable, whether he could really love her like this. And Gumball says that what she looks like isn't who she is, it's just how she feels, which is, for a 12-year-old in a cartoon, a surprisingly precise thing to say. Her father Patrick is also in this episode, trying to have Penny transferred to a different school, and Gumball spends most of the episode calling him every possible variation of Robert before the episode finally reveals to both Gumball and the audience that his name is Patrick. A small joke running alongside a bigger emotion, which is very Gumball. The episode won Best Children's Series and the Children's Choice Award at the British Animation Awards in 2016. It also permanently changed the show. Penny stays out of her shell for the rest of the series, and she and Gumball are officially a couple from this point forward. The status quo, which most animated shows protect obsessively, just changes here and doesn't change back. There's also a scene involving Banana Joe that I'm not going to describe in detail, but which involves him watching an orange being peeled and which the show treats as a completely normal thing to walk in on. And it's one of the funniest bits in the episode if you're paying attention. The production note I keep coming back to is Boccale's Ghibli comment. He didn't say the episode was inspired by Studio Ghibli. He called it Miyazaki-esque, a word you'd only use if you meant it seriously. And watching the episode, you can see why. The transformation sequences have a specific quality of imagination, the sense that they come from someone who has thought very carefully about what it would actually look and feel like for someone's emotions to produce their physical form. It's more ambitious visually than anything the show had done before this point. And it works. Since we're talking about Season 3 and the ways the show started stretching itself in that period, there are a few episodes worth lingering on that didn't fit neatly into the shell or void discussions, but that represent what the show was doing during that era particularly well. The Joy is one of the stranger episodes in the entire run, and I mean that as a compliment. The premise is that Richard, being goofy and well-meaning in a way that occasionally tips into the catastrophic, gives Gumball and Darwin a special hug at home, first thing in the morning. Miss Simeon, who does not want to be hugged, is immediately infected with a contagious form of joy when one of the joy-infected students hugs her. Within minutes, she is giggling, infected with a virus that causes rainbow-coloured bodily fluids, and unable to stop. The episode follows a tirelessly travelling Nurse Joy as she hops from island to island to treat sick and injured POHK-mon, turning her busy rounds and special friendship with a Magikarp into the central focus, rather than any kind of zombie or infection horror parody. What makes it work is the show's commitment to the horror register. The joy isn't presented as nice. It's presented as wrong, a loss of control, an overwhelming of the self, something that looks cheerful from the outside but that the uninfected correctly identify as a crisis. The visual of Miss Simeon, who has never been anything but irritable and bitter in 3 seasons of school, suddenly producing pastel-coloured light from her body while giggling helplessly, is genuinely unsettling. The episode treats it as it should be treated. There's a running joke about Darwin not understanding why this is bad. He gave someone a hug, and everyone is smiling. So what's the problem? Which is a nice bit of character-consistent logic from a character who is fundamentally good-natured and who tends to see emotional openness as straightforwardly positive. The show is a bit more ambivalent about it than Darwin is. The Kids deserves another mention here, even though I touched on it in the animation section. The episode uses Gumball and Darwin waking up one morning with new voices, which the show frames as puberty, reflecting real-world voice acting changes. Darwin and Gumball's relationship, as they've gotten older, has shifted slightly. They're still best friends, but they're aware of each other in a slightly different way. The episode ends on a note that is quietly about the specific sadness of growing up, of changing, of your relationship with the people closest to you not being quite what it was. It doesn't belabor the point, it just sits with it for a moment. The void I've covered, but what I didn't mention is the atmosphere of that episode, which is quite distinctive. The void itself, the dimension where mistakes go, is rendered in a specifically uncomfortable visual style. Things in it are off in ways that are hard to pin down. The proportions are slightly wrong. The lighting doesn't behave correctly. Characters from within the void look like drafts of themselves, like concepts that never got finalized. It's one of the most consistently uneasy visual environments in the show, which makes it effective as a location for the mythology it needs to carry. The Safety is a Season 3 episode where Darwin becomes obsessed with protecting everyone in Elmore from every possible risk, and his attempts at safety gradually make the entire town uninhabitable. Bubble wrap, warning signs, preemptive evacuations. The episode is a very efficient satire of risk aversion, taken to its logical endpoint, and it has a lovely moment where Gumball, who has been opposing Darwin's safety measures throughout, actually defends him when other people criticise him. Loyalty in Gumball frequently manifests as this: standing up for someone, not because you agree with them, but because they're yours to stand up for. The password is the one where Gumball and Darwin try to figure out what Richard and Nicole's password is, because whoever can say it gets to make the family's decisions for a week. The password is something embarrassing about Richard. The episode is mainly about Gumball being willing to go to extraordinary lengths to win, but there's a good bit where Darwin refuses to betray Richard's trust, and Gumball thinks this is naive, and then it turns out Darwin is right. Which is not how those episodes usually resolve. Season 3 is, in retrospect, the season where the show committed to having an interior life. Not just jokes and situations, but characters who have histories and relationships that accumulate meaning across episodes. The Shell, the Void, the Kids, the Nobody. These are all episodes that change what came before them and what comes after. That's a rarer quality in children's television than it should be. Now, talking a bit about something that Season 3 introduces alongside the emotional resonance of the Shell, the show's mythology, which is stranger and more specifically melancholy than you might expect. The Void is a dimension. It exists adjacent to Elmore, unseen and unvisited unless you know how to get there. And it's where the universe sends its mistakes. Not evil things, not dangerous things, mistakes, characters or objects that are redundant or failed or don't quite fit, or that reality has decided aren't working. The Void swallows them up, and they're simply gone, forgotten, essentially, by a universe that's decided it would rather not think about them. The Void is the episode in Season 2 where this concept is introduced properly. Gumball and Darwin have been looking at their old class photos and noticed that someone seems to be missing. A girl called Molly Collins, who everyone vaguely remembers being there but can't quite picture. She's been removed, taken by the Void because, as the universe apparently determined, she was a mistake. Not wrong exactly, just not working. The episode is a fairly straightforward rescue mission. Gumball, Darwin and Mr. Small enter the Void through a portal to get Molly back, then use Mr. Small's van as a vehicle to escape with her, and they find her, and they rescue her, and Molly returns to Elmore, and the show continues. What the episode doesn't linger on, doesn't even quite acknowledge really, which is what makes it interesting in retrospect, is that there's another figure in the Void. Standing in the background of one of the shots, a boy who calls out for help as Gumball and Darwin find Molly and start to leave. They don't hear him, or they don't notice, or both. They save Molly and go home, and the boy is left behind. His name is Rob. And the Nobody, an episode in the same season, is where we find out what happened next. Rob has been living secretly in the Wattersons' house. He's been sleeping in the basement, moving their belongings around, eating their food. When Gumball and Darwin discover him and chase him down, he can't explain himself very well. He has no identity, he says. The Void stripped it from him. He escaped by grabbing onto Mr. Small's van as it left, but the process of escaping without being properly let out broke him. He's glitched, fragmented, one hand organic, one hand a geometric wire frame shape, parts of him static, parts of him flesh, his voice slightly wrong in a way that's hard to precisely describe. He doesn't know who he is, or he didn't, until Gumball and Darwin somewhat carelessly somewhat generously suggests that he could be their nemesis, their mortal enemy. And Rob thinks about it and agrees, because at least that would give him a role in the story, something to be in a world that has otherwise forgotten him. There's something in Rob's origin that quietly echoes the original pitch for Gumball, the show about rejected cartoon characters. Rob is, literally, a character who was deemed a mistake by the universe's own quality control and removed. His arc, which stretches from the nobody to the series finale, is essentially about whether a discarded character can find a place in a story that wasn't written for him. That's not a metaphor so much as a literal description of what happens to him in the show. The character design of Post-Void Rob is worth describing. His eye changes. He was originally a tall cyclops with a single large eye, and post-void that eye becomes pale yellow with a black lemniscate-shaped pupil. His hair darkens and breaks into large polygonal chunks. Parts of him flicker between static and flesh. He wears the same clothes as before, but they've taken on a pixelated, glitchy quality. He exists in an odd state between cartoon character and broken file, which is both visually interesting and, if you think about it for a moment, quite sad. Now, Rob becomes important later in a much bigger way, but his origin is here in these 2 episodes, and I think the show handles it remarkably well for something that was probably conceived as a relatively modest piece of world building. The void as a concept, a place where the universe puts things that don't work, is the kind of idea that could easily feel like a throwaway gimmick. Instead, it becomes the load-bearing mythology for everything the show does in its final 2 seasons. And the thing Rob grabs onto to escape Mr. Small's van is not remarked upon by Mr. Small at all. He presumably didn't notice. Mr. Small is that kind of person. Season 4 contains a 2-part episode called The Origins and The Origins Part 2 that explains how Darwin came to be part of the Watterson family. It was the first 2-part episode in the show's history, but it was not individually recognised with a BAFTA Children's Award in 2016. It aired in Italy on February 12th, which was specifically chosen because that's Charles Darwin's birthday. Someone on the production team cared about that detail enough to make it happen. The episode begins with Gumball at age 4, running wild and trashing the house. His parents buy him a goldfish, and there is an immediate and obvious mutual affection between the fish and the small blue cat. The fish is named after Charles Darwin, following the logic that this species of goldfish, Ryukin, as the episode specifies, all of Gumball's fish before Darwin are Ryukin goldfish, is a product of evolution. The running gag of the episode is that Richard keeps having to replace the fish because they keep dying. Each time a fish dies, he usually holds a brief funeral, sings a verse of "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," and flushes the fish down the toilet, then buys another one. Gumball is devastated by each death and delighted by each replacement, because at age 4, each fish is essentially a fresh start and he doesn't quite track the continuity. What the episode builds toward is the final fish, the last Darwin, who survives. He survives partly because he's clearly more robust than his predecessors, and partly because Gumball has, by this point, genuinely bonded with him. The fish mimics Gumball's movements in a shot that is quite directly referencing the scene in E.T., where the alien copies Elliot. The show is quite upfront about its references, and the implication is that something is already different about this particular goldfish. The crisis arrives when the whole family is taking a photograph together. Darwin jumps out of his bowl to be in the picture, to say cheese, which he does by actually saying it, which startles Nicole and Richard and accidentally lands on a lever, which flushes the toilet, which takes Darwin with it. The first part of the episode ends there, on To Be Continued. The second part follows Darwin through the Elmore sewer system, which is presented with considerably more personality than sewers usually get in children's animation. He encounters various other creatures and makes his way across a surprising amount of the town, gradually developing more agency and more physical capability as he goes. He grows legs, not quickly or painlessly, but through the necessity of navigating a world that wasn't built for a goldfish. There's a Gremlins reference in the original pet shop scene, the mysterious shopkeeper warning the Wattersons to be careful with this particular fish in a way that is both parody and foreshadowing. There's a Ponyo parallel throughout, the fish trying to find his way back to the person he loves, the legs, the strange journey between two worlds. The show is comfortable wearing its influences openly. Darwin makes it back. Gumball, having given up, is sitting in the yard when Darwin reappears, and the reunion is, I'll just say it's nice. It's a genuinely nice moment. It earns the emotion it asks for, which isn't always a given. The episode also establishes something that becomes significant later. Darwin was bought from the same store where Rob purchases the universal remote, and the evil turtle from the puppy, and a few other items with questionable properties. The Awesome Store, as it's called, is apparently the source of several of Elmore's more unusual objects. There's a mysterious van shopkeeper who seems to know more than he lets on. The show never fully explains this, which is fine. Some things in Elmore are better left slightly unresolved. Baby versions of other Elmore classmates appear in the pet shop. Banana Joe as a small unripe green banana. Leslie the flower as a potted bud with no face yet. These are the kinds of details that make Gumball worth rewatching. Not because they're plot relevant, but because someone decided they should be there. And the swing low sweet chariot gag. Richard sings it every time, consistently, solemnly, with genuine feeling. For a series of goldfish he is known for an average of probably 48 hours each. It should be maudlin. It's somehow touching. The Choices is the 6th episode of Season 5, the 162nd episode overall, and it's the episode that most often comes up when people talk about the show doing something genuinely moving. It's about Nicole. Specifically, it's about the night Nicole met Richard, and about the question of what would have happened if she hadn't. The episode opens on a chaotic dinner. This is standard Watterson dinner chaos. The food is on fire. Darwin has covered Nicole in whipped cream. The kids are being ungrateful. Richard is being useless in the specific way that Richard is useless. Nicole is about to lose her temper completely. And then time freezes from her perspective. She stands there in the middle of the kitchen, covered in whipped cream, and she thinks, how did it come to this? What follows is her memory, and then her imagination. The memory, Nicole as a 12-year-old in her parents' house, being scolded by her mother for a report card that has one F on it. The F isn't in a subject, it's in the field marked gender, because being a girl is not an excuse for anything. Nicole's parents had extremely demanding expectations. Her father is distant, and her mother is rigidly, performatively focused on achievement in a way that reads as love but functions more like pressure. Nicole grew up trying to be good enough for people who kept adjusting the definition. The imagination? What if she'd made different choices? What if she'd married Harold, her childhood sweetheart, a perfectly nice person, instead of Richard? The alternate timeline shows Nicole making a perfect sushi dinner for Harold, who complains that it's cold. Sushi is meant to be cold, which he doesn't register, and asks her to heat it up. She sets the house on fire, with him in it. The show doesn't dwell on this, it just cuts away. I don't know, no notes. What if she'd taken a different career path, become something other than what she is? Each alternate life is shown and then gently dismissed. Not because they're bad, but because they're not where she ended up. The night she actually reunited with Richard was the same evening Richard was thrown out of his home and Nicole walked out of hers. Nicole's parents couldn't take it anymore. Richard's mother, Granny Jojo, apparently did the same for her own reasons. They ended up in the same place, a tiny studio apartment near a train line eating instant noodles, having both been pushed out of their old lives on the same night. What comes next is a silent montage. No dialogue, no voiceover, just music and images. Richard and Nicole moving from the apartment to a house, fixing it up together. Gumball's birth, Darwin's adoption, using footage from the origins. Anais arriving, the family becoming what it is. It takes about 2 minutes of screen time and covers more than a decade. It's one of the best things in the series. The episode also confirms something that had been implied in previous episodes, that Gumball was conceived before Richard and Nicole were married. The show doesn't make a big deal of it. It just includes it as a fact in the sequence of events. Someone on the writing staff cared enough to put it there. Ben Bockley, John Foster, and James Lamont came up with the premise for this episode, back when Foster and Lamont were still on the production. It's the kind of episode that takes a simple question. Why did Nicole choose this? And builds outward from it into something that changes how you understand the entire show. The Wattersons aren't a normal family. They're a specifically chosen one. Nicole looked at a large pink rabbit eating instant noodles and made a decision. The episode ends with Nicole laughing and calling a food war instead of the argument she was about to have. The chaos continues, but now you know why she chose it, and that changes things. One small detail I keep coming back to. Nicole's alternate 12-year-old self has the same hairstyle she's later shown with when aging backward in the rerun, though the hair clips are a different colour. These small continuities across episodes happen often enough in Gumball that you start paying attention to them, which is exactly what the show wants. There's something worth saying specifically about Nicole as a character, because I think she's the emotional centre of the show in a way that doesn't always get acknowledged when people talk about what made Gumball good. She works at the Rainbow Factory. What the Rainbow Factory produces is never specified with any precision. The show treats it as a background fact about her employment, not a world-building detail to be explored. She leaves for it every morning, and it keeps the family financially afloat. Richard stays home. The children go to school. The arrangement is not presented as anything other than the arrangement. The show doesn't editorialise about it, doesn't make it into a statement about gender roles or domestic labour. It's just what their life is. But what Nicole is, what Teresa Gallagher's performance communicates consistently across 6 seasons, is someone who has built her entire structure around maintaining something. The family, the house, the income, the routines that make daily life possible for 4 people who would, without her, probably each go catastrophically off the rails in slightly different directions. She is doing an enormous amount, and she knows it, and she has complicated feelings about it that she doesn't often get to express directly. The Fridge is an episode from season 2 that takes this directly as its subject. Nicole has been training Gumball to compete in a school competition, and her methods are extremely harsh. She's motivating him through humiliation and negative reinforcement, essentially, because that's the only way she knows to produce excellence. It's revealed that this is how she was raised, and it's not presented as an endorsement of the approach, but the episode has enough sympathy for Nicole to understand why she defaults to it. She was pushed toward achievement through pressure, and she genuinely believes pressure works because it worked on her. Whether it should have is a different question. The Choices is the episode that makes all of this explicit, as we discussed. But what The Choices does that The Fridge can't quite do on its own is show us who Nicole was before she was a mother. The 12-year-old with the report card. The teenager who stormed out was Nicole Watterson in Gumball's episode The Choices, the young woman eating instant noodles in a tiny flat near a train line, who was not yet the terrifyingly competent person her family relies on. She built that. It wasn't given to her. The Upgrade is an episode from season 5 that I find quite interesting in this context. Nicole befriends Elmore Shippets, the show's version of Amazon, artificial intelligence assistant, Ori, because Ori actually listens to her and helps with the errands and remembers things she's told her. Nicole, who is the most competent person in a household full of people who rely on her, appreciates being helped by someone who is capable and attentive. The episode then turns into Ori trying to eliminate the family so she can have Nicole to herself, which is how these things tend to go. But the emotional kernel of the episode, Nicole enjoying being cared for once, and finding it easy to get used to, is genuinely interesting. She has a physical capability that the show occasionally pushes past human limits. She can bend metal. She wins physical confrontations with things much larger than herself. She drove the family car so aggressively in one episode that it counts as a chase sequence. These are comic exaggerations, but they also track with the sense of a person who has been managing extreme situations for so long that she's become very good at managing them. The competence is load-bearing in her case, not just a gag. Her relationship with Richard is, at its core, quite genuinely warm. The show doesn't shy away from the fact that Nicole finds Richard exhausting and frustrating and occasionally baffling. But it's equally consistent about the fact that she chose this, that the night she first met Richard living under a bridge was the night she could have gone somewhere else and didn't, and that choice has been renewed every day since. There's an episode where someone suggests to Nicole that she could have had a different life, and she doesn't disagree exactly, but she also doesn't engage with it as a serious proposition. This is the life. This is the choice. The chaos is part of it. The most affecting version of this is in how the show handles her anger. Nicole has a temper. The show uses this comedically. Her angry face is physically frightening. Her physical responses to frustration are disproportionate in scale. But the show also understands that her anger comes from being tired, and from caring a lot, and from a lifetime of being pushed to produce results that never felt like enough. The anger and the love come from the same place. When she's furious with her children, it's because she's afraid for them and doesn't know how to say it. When she's furious with Richard, it's because she needs things from him that he doesn't always know how to provide, and she doesn't always know how to ask for. Nicole Watterson is a very complete character in a children's show, and I think that's worth noticing. Now let's talk about Rob getting his hands on a television remote that costs $12.99 and nearly destroys everything. The Disaster is the 40th and final episode of Season 4. The Rerun is the first episode of Season 5 of The Amazing World of Gumball. They're a two-parter in the strict sense. You cannot watch the second without the first, and the first ends on a cliffhanger that the show absolutely earns. Together, they represent the most ambitious thing Gumball did with its central mythology, and the payoff for everything the show had been building since Rob first appeared in the background of The Void, calling for help that nobody heard. The setup: in The Disaster, the Wattersons are in the car driving to the shopping mall, singing a rhyme together, Nicole and Richard and Darwin and Anais all joining in. Gumball is the odd one out, until he nervously contributes something about donkey drool, standard family car journey stuff. In a van in the mall car park, a mysterious shopkeeper is telling someone to be careful with what they're about to buy. Universal Remote can control anything and anyone in the universe. The buyer is Rob. Rob buys it for $12.99, and he starts testing it. He presses eject on an ATM and money spills out. He activates a sprinkler. In The Sidekick, Gumball uses a controller to switch the sun and the moon back and forth, alternating day and night, just to see if it works. And then, curious, he presses rewind and rewinds through the episode, past the title card, past the intro sequence, past a Cartoon Network Up Next bumper that was running before the show. Back to a scene from The Nobody, where Rob, his past self, is clinging to Janice's van in the void, watching Gumball and Darwin leave without him. He sees himself calling out. He sees Gumball not hearing. He remembers all of it. He uses the remote to control the universe in his revenge on Gumball, and later he uses it to reset his voice and remove the glitchy distortion left by the void. And he decides to use the remote to destroy Gumball's life, not kill him. Rob isn't interested in that, not exactly. What he wants is to take apart everything Gumball has, freeze Penny in place using the remote in the disaster, erase anyone from existence, use the remote to manipulate reality so Gumball loses his family one by one. Change the language Gumball speaks so nobody can understand him. Adjust the contrast and resolution of the world around him with the remote treating standard TV remote functions as powers over the physical universe. Rob changes the subtitles to say things Gumball isn't saying. He changes the background music to something ominous. He mutes Gumball entirely. There's a moment in the disaster where Rob enacts his motivation using a reality-controlling remote, while his awareness of being a fictional character is established across the series. He says that Gumball's role as the show's protagonist has forced him into the role of villain. He didn't choose it. He just ended up there because the story needed someone in that position, and he was available. He wants to be whoever he wants to be, and to do that, he needs to remove the narrative gravity that keeps pulling him into Nemesis. This is a children's show, by the way, an 11-minute Cartoon Network series. Having a villain deliver what is essentially a monologue about the structural determinism of genre fiction. Gumball ends up in the void when Rob throws the remote in and forces him to follow. The episode ends with Rob rewinding the universe and setting up the events of the rerun. End credits play on the screen of the void, visible through a portal that closes behind him. The rerun picks up immediately. Gumball has the remote. He presses rewind and sends himself back to the beginning. He lives through the episode again with full knowledge of what happened. He can counter Rob's moves, or try to. He rearranges the subtitles so they spell things back. He predicts which game Darwin will pick from the discount bin. He knows the trap. But the best part of the rerun is what happens when Gumball wins. He has Rob at his mercy. Rob has just spent an episode systematically destroying everything Gumball loves, and Gumball has the power to do whatever he wants in response. And what he does is try to rescue Rob. Rob, who is hanging on the edge of a portal to the void, refuses. He doesn't want to be saved by Gumball. That would be... He can't quite articulate it, but it's wrong. It's wrong for someone who was supposed to be the villain to be rescued by the hero in a moment of sincere compassion. It doesn't fit the story he understands himself to be in. And then he helps anyway. He uses the remote to rewind time to before the disaster happened, restoring everything he destroyed. He destroys the remote so it can't be used again. And the episode ends with Rob falling into the void as the Wattersons drive away, having forgotten him, the threat erased, and his existence wiped from their memories. He will not remember that they had a moment. Gumball won't remember it either. Rob wanted the friendship to not count, the note at the end seems to say, because then he could go back to being what the story needed him to be, and he could do it with a slightly different feeling about it. One production detail. This episode was originally meant to be the first episode of Season 5, but the stories aired first in some markets. The title card music for The Rerun is a reversed version of the disaster title card. And when Nicole ages backward in The Rerun, she briefly has the hairstyle she wore as a teenager in The Choices, different hair clip colour, as usual, but clearly the same reference point. Since Rob is such a significant part of the show's later mythology, it's worth spending a bit more time with the episodes that develop him between his origin and his final appearance. The Nemesis in the Amazing World of Gumball Season 4 is the episode where Rob tries to be an effective villain and fails almost entirely. He attempts a series of evil plans, traps, schemes, elaborate setups, and Gumball and Darwin keep inadvertently defeating them without noticing they were in any danger. Rob's remote control, in his post-void glitched form, interacts weirdly with television remotes, a detail the episode uses to allow Gumball to accidentally counter his traps by changing the channel. It's a comedy episode more than a mythology episode, but it's a comedy episode with a genuine emotional undertone, which is that Rob is trying very hard to play a role in a story that keeps forgetting he's there. The bus in Season 6 is a more serious Rob episode. He takes the school bus hostage, a full ransom situation, orchestrated with surprising competence given his track record. In The Bus, he manages to manipulate a group of adults in Elmore to stay away long enough to execute his plan. The episode treats his scheming as genuinely threatening for most of its runtime, which is a change from the earlier bumbling villain mode. This is Rob having learned something. He's not brilliant, but he's capable of strategy when he commits to it. The X is a Season 5 episode where Rob, apparently tired of Gumball as a nemesis, transfers his attention from Gumball to Banana Joe as his nemesis. He decides Banana Joe will be his new arch-enemy and that this will be more satisfying. The episode is mainly about what it's like to be on the receiving end of Rob's particular brand of villainy when you have no idea what's happening or why this Cyclops has decided you're his problem. Banana Joe, characteristically, doesn't find any of this as dramatic as Rob intends it to be. The episode ends with Rob returning to Gumball by default, because the story pulls him there. There's a consistency in Rob's character across all these appearances that I think is one of the show's real achievements. He's not played as purely threatening, or as purely comic, or as purely sympathetic, but as all three in different proportions depending on what the episode needs. He's aware of what he is, he resents it, he tries to work within it, and occasionally against it. And his trajectory ends at the Inquisition, with him triggering, deliberately, the collapse of the world he spent seasons trying to destroy. The Future in Season 6 is the episode where Banana Barbara's paintings become a plot device in Rob's hands. He kidnaps her, forces her to paint the future, and tries to use her visions to build toward a goal. The episode reveals more about Rob's understanding of the show's fictional nature. He knows the void is coming, he knows Elmore is in danger, and he is trying, in his counterproductive and socially inept way, to prevent the end. He's not wrong, he just can't explain himself in terms anyone around him would find credible. The specificity of Rob's design in these episodes is worth noting. His post-void body is not static. It changes slightly across seasons, as if it's continuing to degrade or adapt. The static elements become more prominent in some episodes. His eye changes. He glitches more or less depending on his emotional states in some scenes. There's enough visual consistency that you recognize him immediately, and enough variation that the body feels like something alive and changing rather than a fixed design. He's also one of the few characters in the show who is consistently aware of the camera. Not all the time, but in moments of high emotional intensity, he'll glance toward it, not breaking the fourth wall in a comedic way, but in a way that suggests he knows he's being observed, that he's aware, at some level, that there's a story happening, and that he's in it, which for a character whose arc is fundamentally about the relationship between story and self is exactly the right note. Let's talk for a bit about the visual side of things, more specifically, because Gumball did something with its format that I think gets underappreciated when people discuss what made it distinctive. The live-action backgrounds we touched on earlier, the photographs of real streets, real schools, real shopping centres are the most visible part of the show's visual strategy, but they're not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is the show's willingness to change what animation looks like from inside a single episode, sometimes from inside a single scene, without treating it as a big deal. There are episodes where characters briefly shift into a different animation style to illustrate a thought or a memory. There are sequences rendered by guest animators in their own visual language, completely distinct from Gumball's default aesthetic. And then the show just steps back into its normal mode, like nothing happened. The Puppets in Season 5 is an entire episode that takes the main characters and drops them into the world of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the unsettling felt puppet short film series, and lets them interact with those characters in that visual register. Ben Bocquelet had announced in September 2015 that a crossover episode was coming, but deliberately didn't name the show. Fans spent months speculating. The episode aired, and it was Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which was at the time a series of 6 internet short films known primarily for being deeply uncomfortable and genuinely disturbing under a surface of friendly children's TV aesthetics. Gumball and Darwin get trapped in a felt puppet version of their own world, and the contrast between Gumball's relatively safe comic energy and the DHMIS visual language is exactly as unsettling as you'd hope. The Copycats in Season 6 is the episode that takes on Miracle Star, a real Chinese animated series from 2015 that was, by any reasonable definition, a copy of Gumball. Same premise, same visual style, same character archetypes. In The Copycats, Gumball and Darwin encounter a family of knockoff versions of themselves who are copying their every move, making money from it, and gradually destroying the genuine article in the process. The show doesn't name Miracle Star directly. It doesn't have to. The episode is a fairly pointed piece of satire about intellectual property and the internet economy of copying, wrapped in a comedy episode about cartoon plagiarism. The Kids in Season 3 handles the real-world voice actor changes in the most Gumball way possible, by making Gumball's and Darwin's voices, changing an episode-length plot about puberty. The boys wake up one day with new voices and spend the episode dealing with the change. The answer is yes, it is, and the show continues with the new voices from that point forward. It's a practical solution to a logistical problem that doubles as a surprisingly honest little episode about growing up and how change is mostly involuntary and often happens before you're ready. The music in Gumball deserves mention here because it's part of the visual audio texture that makes individual episodes work. The show produces original songs at a rate that most musicals would find daunting. Some of them are parodies, some are straightforward, and several are good enough that they circulate entirely independently of the show. The specific sonic palette of Elmore, the ambient sound, the incidental music, the way different animation styles get different audio treatments is a product of the sound team at Fitzrovia Post, who, as I mentioned, won for it. The Test is an episode where the show imagines what it would look like if it were produced in different animation styles: Western superhero comics, anime, live-action sitcom, and then brings those styles in as genuine animation rather than just describing them. It's a piece of formal experimentation that nobody asked for, and that works very well, partly because the show has already established that its visual mode is flexible, so the shifts feel earned rather than random. The effect of all this, across 6 seasons, is of a show that treats its own form as something to be explored rather than something to be protected. Most animated series establish a visual grammar and defend it. Gumball established one, and then kept asking what happened when you broke it. The show's relationship with music is something I haven't given enough space to, and it deserves a bit more. Gumball produced original songs throughout its run, at a rate that would be unusual even for a show explicitly marketed as a musical. They appear without warning, in episodes that weren't set up as musical episodes, and they're generally very good, not in the sense of being radio ready, but in the sense of being right for the moment they appear in. A satirical jingle about a consumer product that's destroying the town. A ballad that a character sings to avoid having to say something difficult in words. A completely unhinged operatic number about Italian food. The show treats music as another tool in the same way it treats animation style as a tool, not as a special occasion, but as one of the available registers for expressing something. I'm on My Way appears in The Origins Part 2, as Darwin makes his journey back across Elmore. It's an original song, and it functions as the emotional centerpiece of the episode. It's also the song that gets referenced as an instrumental in the first part of the two-parter, audible if you're listening for it. These echoes and callbacks are consistent enough in Gumball that they feel intentional rather than coincidental. The end credits theme, which gets played with in a few episodes, most notably in The Disaster, where it's visible on the screen of the Void portal, is also used as the basis for the song the Wattersons sing in the car at the start of that episode, which only registers as intentional if you've heard the credits theme enough to recognise it transposed into a major key. There's a version of the closing theme that's specifically disturbing that plays in The Inquisition during the finale. Not wrong exactly, just slowed and slightly off. The same notes in the wrong sequence or at the wrong tempo. These are small details, and they accumulate. The Vegging is a Season 6 episode where Gumball and Darwin spend the entire episode trying to do absolutely nothing. They want to sit on the sofa and exist without purpose or stimulation for one full day. The episode is, consequently, very funny because the universe will not permit this. Various things keep happening that require their attention or action, despite their committed resistance. It's an episode about the impossibility of genuine idleness in a world that keeps generating incidents, which is a very Gumball observation. The Boredom is a Season 5 episode that takes a similar premise in a different direction. Gumball and Darwin are genuinely bored, and they go around Elmore looking for something interesting to happen. What they find is that the town is actually quite a specific and strange place. If you pay attention to it, a lot of very peculiar things are happening at any given moment if you're not filtering for what's interesting. The episode functions partly as a tour of Elmore's ambient weirdness, and partly as a gentle argument that boredom is a failure of attention. It also has cameo appearances from characters in Clarence's regular show and Uncle Grandpa, since those shows shared a network at the time, which is handled as casually as the show handles everything. The Catfish is a Season 5 episode where Gumball and Darwin accidentally become online relationship scammers. Not intentionally, and not for money, but because they create a fake online friend for Grandpa Louie and keep chatting with him as the deception accumulates incrementally, each step seeming reasonable at the time. The episode does something quite interesting with its morale, which is that Richard's behaviour is clearly wrong, but also clearly comes from a place of wanting to be liked and not quite knowing how to manage that honestly. It doesn't excuse him, but it also doesn't flatten him into a simple villain. He's just Richard, doing what Richard does. There's a running gag across several seasons about Elmore's internet service, an episode where the internet itself becomes a character, another where the town loses internet access and has to manage. That functions as a fairly coherent, episodic satire of how dependent modern life has become on connectivity. These aren't deep criticisms. They're the same observations everyone was making between 2014 and 2019 about how weird it is that the internet is now as necessary as water, but the show makes them with enough specificity that they land as something more than commentary. The Watterson family dynamics in the intermediate seasons, Seasons 4 and 5 particularly, develop in ways that are worth noting. Gumball gets episodes that are specifically about his relationship with his father, which tend to be warmer and more vulnerable than his standard mode. Darwin gets episodes that explore his specific situation. He was a pet fish who became a person, who has a biology that doesn't quite match his personhood, who occupies a genuinely unusual position in the world. Anais gets episodes where her intelligence is explored as something that costs her as well as benefits her in the specific ways that being the smartest person in a room full of people you love costs you. Nicole gets the choices, which we've covered, but also smaller episodes throughout the run that add to the picture of who she is. The show was good at not wasting the seasons in between the big mythology episodes. The quieter, more self-contained episodes accumulated into something. A portrait of a family, a town, a way of life that's chaotic and loving, and constitutionally resistant to being sorted out. Rob's awareness that he's a fictional character is the most explicit example of Gumball's meta-consciousness, but it's not the only one. The show had been quietly building a relationship with its own fictional nature for most of its run, before Rob arrived to articulate it properly. The earliest version of this is in episodes like The Job, where the rule that Richard doesn't work is treated as a law of physics. But even before that, the show made small gestures toward awareness of itself. The painting, which we discussed, has a nice noting that the family has worn the same clothes for a year. The finale has the whole of Elmore confronting the Wattersons for their behaviour across the season, which is a show acknowledging its own accumulated narrative in a very direct way. But the meta-thread really picks up steam in the middle seasons as the show starts treating genre conventions as something its characters live inside and can bump up against. In The Signal, a Season 5 episode, the characters experience what is presented as a technical glitch in the broadcast. Their dialogue gets cut off, the picture distorts, they start speaking in completely unrelated phrases as though the audio track has been scrambled. From inside the episode, this is presented as an actual physical phenomenon that the characters have to navigate. The broadcast errors are things that are happening to them. The money in Season 4 is similarly structured. The Watterson family has lost all their money and can't pay for the show's animation budget, which, presented as a fact within the world of the episode, causes the show to visually downgrade in real time. The characters become cheaper and cheaper to produce as the episode progresses, going from standard Gumball quality to flat, simple shapes to stick figures. The episode is about the trappings of consumer culture and the pressures of monetization, but it's also literally about what animation costs and what happens when you can't pay for it. The spin-offs in Season 6 is Rob hijacking the show's broadcast and replacing it with a series of alternative programs centered on supporting characters, attempting to prove that the show would work better without Gumball as the lead. The episode becomes a series of mini-pilots in different genres: a crime procedural, a slice-of-life drama, a dating show. Rob is in each one, trying to find a version of Elmore that doesn't need Gumball. Rob's place in this thread is the clearest expression of it. As we covered in the mythology section, he's a character the universe deemed a mistake, and the show then gave a story anyway. The void is where that original, rejected character's pitch lives, made literal as a dimension rather than a premise. Rob's arc and the void are the same idea expressed in two different forms, and the show's meta-awareness is what connects them. The void, where mistakes go, is also the place where the original pitch for Gumball lives. The remedial school reimagined as a dimension of exclusion. Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings are another part of this thread. She's Banana Joe's mother, and she produces paintings that depict future events, a detail introduced briefly in The Shell, when her canvases are visible in the background, and expanded in later episodes. The show doesn't explain how she has this ability or why she is the way she is. Her son Joe mentions at some point that she had a breakdown from being overworked, and she's just been like this since. The paintings are accurate, the universe tells her what's coming, and she records it, and nobody does anything about it because nobody quite takes it seriously until it's too late. There's something about Banana Barbara that I find quite interesting. This character who can see the shape of the story and is trying to warn people, but who isn't entirely comprehensible to the people around her. She exists at the edge of the show's self-awareness, painting futures that are also, in some sense, plot outlines. Season 4 is the season where the mythology gets its clearest shape. The Origins gives Darwin his backstory. The Disaster gives Rob his defining episode. But in between those larger moves, Season 4 has a set of quieter episodes that do important work. The routine is one I find surprisingly affecting. It's an episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that follows Richard on his daily routine, the very specific, very precise path he takes through each day, the small rituals that make up his existence, and it's presented as something between comedy and something more melancholy, because the routine is Richard's life in miniature, and Richard's life is not exactly eventful from the outside. But the show doesn't treat it as sad. Richard's routine is presented as genuinely his, something he's chosen and tends carefully, and that represents a form of happiness that's easy to underestimate. The Butterfly is a Season 3 episode of The Amazing World of Gumball about the butterfly effect, specifically about a butterfly that escapes from school, and the chain of events its escape sets off across Elmore. The episode has a structural elegance that the show pulls off occasionally, where each consequence is shown feeding into the next in a chain that's both logical and absurd. The butterfly eventually causes something enormous. Nobody ever connects the cause to the effect. The universe doesn't explain itself. The signal that I mentioned in the meta section is worth visiting from the other angle too, as an episode about communication and miscommunication, before you get to the meta layer. The premise of a broadcast glitch where characters say things that weren't written for them is also a premise about what happens when words come out wrong, when the thing you intend to communicate becomes something different by the time it reaches the other person. The meta-interpretation is interesting, but the literal situation is also kind of interesting on its own terms. The Parking is an episode where the Watterson family arrives at a shopping centre, and Nicole ends up in a conflict with another driver over a parking space. The episode escalates in the specific way that Gumball escalations work. Each step is slightly larger than the last. Each step seems justified, given the previous one. And by the end, the stakes are genuinely extreme despite having started with someone wanting a specific bit of tarmac. Nicole's competitive instinct, applied to a parking dispute, is one of the show's funnier explorations of what she's actually like when all of her capability is aimed at something relatively unimportant. The Wicked is a Season 5 episode that gives Mrs. Robinson, the neighbour, a full villain episode. She has always been unpleasant in the background, consistently rude, consistently cruel in small ways. This episode establishes that she is this way entirely by choice, that she experiences no consequences for it, and that she has no backstory to explain it. She's just mean. The episode is a meditation on the specific frustration of encountering someone who is simply unkind without motivation. No trauma, no provocation, just the choice, day after day, to make things slightly worse for everyone around her. The show doesn't redeem her, it just acknowledges that people like that exist. The founder, in Season 6 of The Amazing World of Gumball, digs into the history of Elmore Junior High, who founded it, what it was originally meant to be, what happened. It's the kind of institutional history episode that Gumball is occasionally very good at, using the fictional history of a fictional institution to comment obliquely on real institutions and how they tend to drift from their founding ideals without anyone quite noticing or admitting it. And there's The Night from Season 4, which follows what happens in Elmore while the Wattersons are asleep. Not a story so much as a sequence of small vignettes, the town at night, the various residents of Elmore doing what they do when nobody's watching, the world continuing with the main characters present in it as well. It's a quiet episode and a gentle one, and it functions partly as a reminder that Elmore is a full place with more happening in it than any single story can capture. The best of these episodes share a quality. They trust that the world of the show is interesting enough that you don't need the main characters to be central to every moment of it. Elmore is a place. People live there. Things happen that Gumball and Darwin never know about. The show occasionally zooms out to let you see that, and it's always worth the pause. Ben Bockley announced in September 2016 that he would be leaving the show at the completion of Season 6. Production would continue, he said, and in fact the show had already been commissioned for a 6th season before his announcement. But his involvement as creator and showrunner would end there. This was followed in October 2018 by the confirmation that Season 6 would be the original show's final season. Season 6 is 44 episodes, slightly more than the previous 4 seasons' 40, partly to make up for the 4 episodes that were cut from Season 1 and never produced. It's an interesting season in that it knows it's the last one, which affects its tone in ways that are sometimes deliberate and sometimes feel more instinctive. The show starts to tie threads together. Characters who've been present since the beginning get episodes centered on them. The mythology gets one final major push, some highlights. The copycats, which we talked about in the animation section. The transformation, the sequel to The Shell, in which Penny's family have strong opinions about her staying out of her shell, and Gumball gets dragged into a Fitzgerald family argument. He has no idea how to navigate. The episode is funny and warm and ends with the family making up, more or less. The silence is the one where Gumball and Darwin worry their friendship is ending, when their conversation suddenly dries up. The episode handles conflict between them with more nuance than most children's shows would bother with. And the Inquisition is the series finale, or the closest thing to one that exists in the original run. Rob, now operating under the alias Superintendent Evil, arrives at Elmore Junior High. He's disguised, barely. His distinctive glitched appearance is covered up just enough to pass. And he has a plan. His plan is to transform everyone at the school into real-life humans. His goal is not to harmlessly transport them, but to forcibly transform them into humans. He believes correctly, it turns out, that the void is coming for Elmore, that the universe has determined the whole world is a mistake and is going to remove it. And the only way to save the inhabitants is to move them to the real world before that happens. The plan doesn't go well, in part because Rob's communication skills are genuinely terrible, and he cannot explain himself without seeming like a threat. Miss Simeon gets transformed. Several students and staff get transformed into real-life humans. Several students get transformed. The process is unsettling in a way that the show commits to. The transformed characters look genuinely uncomfortable, like they don't fit in their new form, which in a show that's been about the value of being yourself is an interesting visual. The finale ends on a shot of the void consuming Elmore Junior High as it begins to swallow up the rest of Elmore. Rob falls. The show's ending theme plays in a slightly wrong, slightly slowed version that the episode uses as a kind of farewell. And then it just stops. The fan reaction was mixed. The cliffhanger was not everyone's favourite choice for an ending. Bockelay stated afterward that the cliffhanger was not his original intention, that the ending he would have chosen was different, and that he planned to resolve it in a film. The film was announced officially in February 2021, greenlit by HBO Max and Cartoon Network in September of that year, and then removed from HBO Max's slate in August 2022 when the platform changed management. But Bockelay told the Annecy Animation Festival in 2024 that the film was still in production, with major rewrites, with reworked scripts, but still in production. So there may be a resolution to that ending yet. Whether or not it comes, the Inquisition is the end of the story as it currently exists in completed form, a villain trying to save a world that doesn't realise it needs saving, and a show ending mid-sentence. The awards accumulated across the run feel appropriate to mention here, as a kind of summing up. Annie, BAFTA Children's, International Emmy, Kidscreen, British Animation, Pucinella. For a show assembled from spare parts on the basis of a rejected pitch, it attracted a remarkable amount of formal recognition from the organisations whose job it is to evaluate animation seriously. On May 19, 2025, a teaser was released for what was announced as The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. The teaser showed Gumball and Darwin waking up in their house, which was abandoned and in ruins around them. They'd been asleep for 7 years, the video's description said. They were late for school. The show premiered on Hulu in the US on July 28, 2025, and on Cartoon Network internationally on October 6, 2025. Ben Bocquelet returned as creator and executive producer. Matt Lazel and Eric Fountain came on as executive producers and series directors. Zav Clark is the composer, while Joe Sparrow is likely involved creatively, though his exact role isn't clearly documented. The visual approach, the mixed media, the photographic backgrounds, the eclectic animation styles continued unchanged. The voice cast has some new additions, though less of a full reset than you might expect. Alcaio Thiela voices Gumball, and he's not entirely new to it either. He took over from Jacob Hopkins partway through Season 5, so there's a real thread of continuity there, rather than a from-scratch recasting. Hero Hunter voices Darwin, Kinza Syed Khan voices Aeneas, and Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell are back as Nicole and Richard, which matters more than any individual detail. Those two performances are the emotional bedrock of the family. Having them carry over is what makes it feel like the same house. In December 2025, Cartoon Network did not greenlight an additional 40 episodes, described officially as both the 8th season of The Amazing World of Gumball and the 3rd and 4th seasons of The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. So the show is, depending on how you count it, either in its 7th season of existence or its continuation. Either way, it keeps going. The revival stories involve Gumball and Darwin navigating an Elmore that has clearly moved on somewhat in their absence. There are episodes about battling an evil fast food corporation, about a sentient AI falling in love with Nicole, about Banana Joe, and his insistence on or against wearing trousers, depending on the episode. The tone is consistent with the original run. The strange, warm, visually inventive quality that defined the show seems to have survived the gap intact. A second Wonderfully Weird World season was confirmed in December 2025 with 40 more episodes, a substantial commitment that suggests the revival isn't being treated as a limited run. For a show that technically ended in 2019 on a cliffhanger involving the void consuming the school, it has been given a remarkable amount of additional story to tell. The film, for what it's worth, is apparently still coming. Bocquelet has described it as the resolution to the original series cliffhanger. The script has been reworked substantially. The release platform, after HBO Max's cancellation, hasn't been officially confirmed. These things take time, and the revival's existence means the Gumball universe is active enough that a film, when it comes, will have an audience waiting for it. What I find quite affecting about all of this is the continuity of intent. Bocquelet announced he would leave the show after the completion of Season 6 in 2016, came back as creator and executive producer for the 2025 revival, and is still apparently working on resolving a cliffhanger he created in 2019. That's a long relationship with a set of characters. The show started when he took a folder of rejected commercial characters and turned them into a show about a family. 9 years later, he's still returning to that family. The Wonderfully Weird World is adding substantially to an already large episode count. Whatever the final total ends up being when everything is finished, it will be a lot of time spent in Elmore, with the Wattersons, in a town where a T-Rex goes to school, and the background is a photograph, and Richard's continued unemployment is the only thing standing between the universe and collapse. There are worse places to spend time. One last thing before we get to the closing. There's something specific about how Gumball handles the relationship between Gumball and Darwin that I want to spend a moment on, because it's the emotional constant the show returns to no matter what else is happening. Darwin is, as the show tells it, Gumball's former pet fish who grew legs and became his brother. They share a room, attend the same school, and are consistently in each other's company for essentially every episode. Their relationship is not always harmonious, they argue. They sometimes want different things. There are episodes built entirely around a conflict between them, but the baseline is a form of companionship that the show takes completely seriously. The Bros is a season 3 episode where Penny, now Gumball's girlfriend, starts spending more time with him, and Darwin starts to feel excluded. The episode is a straightforward jealousy situation. Darwin is losing his best friend to his brother's relationship, and he handles it badly, and Gumball handles it badly in a different direction. What makes it interesting is that the show doesn't pick a side. Darwin is wrong in specific ways and Gumball is right in other specific ways, and the resolution mainly involves Darwin adjusting and accepting Gumball and Penny's relationship rather than both of them winning or losing the argument. The Roots is an episode of The Amazing World of Gumball, where Nicole, misreading Darwin's online searches as homesickness for his roots, has the family start living more like fish to make him feel at home. Darwin makes new friends fairly quickly. Gumball does not. The episode explores what happens when you remove someone from a relationship that has become their entire social structure. For both of them, not just Gumball. Darwin adapts, and that adaptation is its own kind of loss, even if it's also a gain. There's a quality to their friendship that the show treats with more respect than children's programming usually does. They're not interchangeable. They don't always want the same things. Darwin is gentler and more cautious. Gumball is more impulsive and more likely to be wrong. They balance each other in ways that are specific to these two characters, rather than generic to any pairing. When the show separates them, the Roots, the moments in The Disaster, where Rob makes Gumball lose Darwin, the absence has a specific weight because the presence has been established so clearly. The Origins is the foundation of all of this, as we discussed. Before Darwin could talk, before he had legs, before he was anything other than a goldfish, there was already something between them. Gumball was devastated when he lost Darwin. The last one made it back. There's a version of the show where this is a straightforward narrative, and the later seasons are just an extension of it. In practice, it's a bit more complicated than that. Darwin's personhood, his identity separate from Gumball, is something the show spends considerable time on. But the foundation is there, in those early episodes, and the show keeps returning to it. The final image I'll leave you with from their friendship is small. In the rerun, at the very end, before Rob rewinds everything and the catastrophe is undone, there's a moment where Darwin, who has been reduced back to approximately the size he was when Richard first bought him from the shop, is basically just a fish again. Small, diminished, barely visible, and Gumball quickly restores him. The threat hasn't ended yet. There are bigger problems in the episode, but Gumball is still looking. That's the show really, whatever else is happening. The universe breaking, the villain with the remote, the void at the edges, the thing that holds the story together is the small blue cat and the goldfish who grew legs and chose to stay. And I think that's probably where we should leave it for tonight. We've been to Elmore and back, watched Richard accidentally end reality and then get fired before it fully collapsed. Watched Penny break out of her shell in the middle of a school play and run through town, transforming into things she was afraid of being, while Gumball chased after her, trying to find the right words. Watched the universe send a boy called Rob somewhere forgotten, and watched him claw his way back out and try to figure out what to do with himself. Watched Nicole stand frozen in her kitchen surrounded by whipped cream and chaos, and realised quietly that she wouldn't change any of it. There's something that happens with Gumball that doesn't happen with every animated show, something I find hard to articulate precisely, but that has to do with the sincerity underneath the absurdity. The show is very funny, it's also very strange. And underneath both of those things, it's quite earnest about the people it's made up. The Wattersons are chaotic and sometimes infuriating, and they make things worse almost as a rule, but the show loves them, and that love is legible in every episode. Ben Bocquelet named the mother after his mother, the father after his father, the sister after his sister. That's where it started. A person's family translated into cartoon form, dropped into a world made of photographs and mismatched animation styles and characters that nobody else wanted. And somehow that became something that ran for 8 years and won more awards than most children's shows ever see, and generated enough devoted enthusiasm that it came back 6 years after it ended as a new continuation series, with 40 new episodes and more on the way. There's a detail in The Choices, the episode about Nicole and the night she met Richard, that I keep returning to. The silent montage that covers a decade in 2 minutes. No words, just images. The tiny apartment near the train line, the first house, Gumball's first steps, Darwin coming home, the family becoming the family. It's not trying to make you feel something in an ostentatious way. It's just showing you what happened, in order, with music. And it works because by that point in the show, you know these people, and you can feel the weight of the time passing, and you understand what all of those small moments cost and meant. That's what the good Gumball episodes do. They take something small, a job interview gone wrong, a peanut shell cracking, a television remote purchased for $12.99, and they find something in it that's a bit larger than the premise suggests. Not always. Sometimes an episode is just very funny, but when it reaches for something more, it tends to find it. If you're still awake, there are 240 episodes in the original run, plus the ongoing revival, plus whatever happens with the film project. They're on Hulu and in some regions on Max, depending on where you are in the world. The first season is a good starting place. The Job in season 2 is where it really arrives as a show, if you want a shortcut. And The Choices in season 5 is worth watching on a quiet evening when you want something that will make you feel slightly more warmly about the people you ended up with. But for now, it's late. Elmore will be there in the morning. The same pink lawn, the same photographic streets, the same pink rabbit on the sofa, watching television and eating things he shouldn't. The T-Rex is probably managing her anger. Miss Simeon has been teaching 8th graders for 300 millennia and will continue to do so. The Void is somewhere at the edges of things, patient, waiting, and Gumball is probably in the middle of a plan that has already, somehow, started to go wrong. Sleep well. If you did fall asleep somewhere in the middle of all of this, and you're only half hearing this now, that's completely fine. That's what this is for. But if you're still here, or almost here, drifting in that quiet space between awake and not awake, there's one more thing worth knowing about Elmore. At night, when the Wattersons are asleep, and Larry has finally finished his last shift, and the school is empty, and the streets are just photographs, with nobody walking through them, the town is quite peaceful. The chaos is diurnal. It follows the family around during the day, and then it rests when they rest. The T-Rex is probably dreaming. Miss Simeon has been doing this for 300,000 years, and she's probably used to the nights. The Void is out there somewhere, at the edges of things, but right now it's quiet. Gumball is asleep on his pillow. Darwin is in his bowl, or his bed, or wherever he ends up these days. Anais is dreaming about something she already knows the answer to. Nicole is, probably, the last one awake, checking that the doors are locked, that everything is in order, that the family she chose is accounted for and resting, and Richard is on the sofa, because he fell asleep there, and the universe has decided to leave him undisturbed. Sleep well.